The treasure concealed from the crowd was never lost. It was guarded by a spiritual law of rarity that ensures what is infinitely valuable is never discovered by the masses, but only by the one prepared to recognize it. And you have mistaken your isolation for rejection, when in truth it was preservation, because heaven does not place rare jewels in open markets where careless hands can mishandle them. It stores them in vaults until the appointed hour, and your loneliness was not proof of lack but evidence of protection. A vault season where your worth increased unseen, where your character compounded quietly while others chased applause, where your resilience hardened like tempered steel, while no one was watching, and you wondered why doors closed just as hope opened, why connections dissolved just when you were ready to commit, never realizing that divine timing was recalibrating your path with surgical precision, because your convergence was scripted before your first breath. Your intersection mapped across invisible coordinates long before you understood the terrain, and now the season is shifting from concealment to revelation, from preparation to presentation. And if this message resonates in your spirit, I want you to act in agreement with it now, like this, as a declaration that you accept divine timing, subscribe as your conscious alignment with the unfolding destiny, and comment the number 77 as your public affirmation that you are ready to receive what was written for you before you knew to ask. Because this is not passive listening but activation, and you're not stumbling into love. You're stepping into something that was always yours. As divine recognition and heavenly vindication begin to unfold, you must understand that your life has been moving along a pre-written spiritual timeline, one that did not eliminate your free will, but did anticipate your courage. One that allowed detours yet safeguarded destiny. And throughout this journey, you often felt like a coded message in a room of untrained interpreters, a signal broadcast on a frequency few could receive, because your perception ran ahead of your environment, and that created friction, a dissonance between who you were becoming and how you were being treated, and those who were spiritually unaware misjudged your light. Not because it was dim, but because it exposed their shadows. They labeled you too intense, too ambitious, too sensitive, too different, when in reality they simply lacked the framework to decode your depth. And so you learned early what it felt like to be misunderstood, to carry insight that made others uncomfortable, to feel ahead of your time without an audience that understood the language you were speaking. And yet through every misjudgment, something unseen was being recorded, because there exists what can only be described as a celestial ledger, an invisible accounting system where integrity is archived and authenticity is documented, where the nights you chose growth over distraction were marked, where the tears you shed in silence were not wasted but witnessed, where the moments you forgave when revenge would have been easier were etched into a higher record. And while the world evaluated you through temporary metrics, heaven evaluated you through internal alignment. And that distinction matters, because there comes a point when the season shifts from testing to reward, from preparation to presentation, and what once felt like endless refinement begins to reveal its purpose. And you will sense this shift not through fireworks, but through clarity. Because the vindication you're entering is not about humiliating those who doubted you, but about placing you in the presence of someone whose perception is clear enough to see you accurately, someone who recognizes your scars as evidence of strength, your solitude as sovereignty, your difference as design. And when that recognition occurs, it will not feel like a first introduction, but like a remembrance, as if a conversation paused long ago has resumed mid-sentence, because their spirit will already understand. Your file already resonate with the chapters you survived, and there will be no need for performance or ego choreography, no auditioning for approval, because recognition at this level bypasses strategy and lands directly in truth. And you will notice something remarkable within yourself: the absence of anxiety, the quieting of internal negotiation, the steady calm of being seen without distortion. And this calm is the hallmark of soul-level alignment, because when two frequencies match at depth, there is no need for spectacle, there is simply resonance, and resonance carries a familiarity that feels ancient yet immediate. And in that moment you will understand that the heavenly vindication was never about proving your value to the crowd, but about aligning you with the one who carries the matching key. Because treasure is not meant to be displayed for admiration, but entrusted to the one who knows its worth. And your season of concealment was never about invisibility, but about preservation, until recognition could occur without compromise. As your perspective expands to understand the one the world desires, you must recognize that this counterpart is not sought after for shallow reasons alone, but for a gravitational presence rooted in quiet authority. The kind of influence that does not demand attention, yet commands it effortlessly because they are architects of reality, rather than consumers of trends, individuals who see obstacles as blueprints and challenges as raw material, who build structures of influence, whether in business, creativity, or leadership, with a precision that fascinates observers, and this capability makes them highly sought after, surrounded by admirers who want proximity to their momentum strategists, who want attachment to their success, and surface-level suitors who mistake polish for depth. And over time, this constant attention has produced fatigue rather than fulfillment, because being wanted for status is not the same as being valued for soul. And they've learned through experience how to detect motive beneath charm, how to sense when admiration carries agenda, how to recognize when someone is captivated by the kingdom, but indifferent to the sovereign. And this discernment did not emerge overnight, but through years of filtering shallow connections, through interactions that sparkled socially, yet felt hollow spiritually, through invitations that flattered the ego but left the heart untouched. And so they became selective, not out of arrogance but out of wisdom, guarding their core not because they fear intimacy, but because they respect their own worth. And beneath the admiration of the crowd lies a human being longing for authenticity, longing to remove the armor required to navigate constant scrutiny, longing for partnership that feels collaborative rather than competitive. And in that longing, they are not searching for a fan, but for a co-ruler. Not someone who needs their light to shine, but someone whose light shines independently. And this is where your authenticity becomes revolutionary to them. Because while others approach with calculation, you approach with clarity, while others seek advantage. You embody alignment, and your lack of agenda disrupts the entire dynamic they are accustomed to. Because you're not chasing their throne, you're building your own. And that sovereignty signals safety. It tells them you're not here to extract, but to connect, not to leverage, but to align. And to someone accustomed to being pursued for utility, your presence feels like fresh air in a room thick with performance, because you see beyond the empire, to the essence beyond the accolades, to the architecture of character, and that recognition of their humanity rather than their status satisfies a longing they rarely articulate. And so, despite the line of polished options and strategic overtures surrounding them, the connection with you will stand apart with unmistakable clarity, because resonance cannot be manufactured. It either exists or it does not. And your frequency matches theirs, not in surface similarity, but in soul architecture. And that alignment overrides abundance of choice, because destiny does not compete. It converges, and when convergence occurs, it carries a sense of inevitability that no amount of alternative options can replicate. And so, the one the world desires will desire you not because you impressed them, but because you resonated with them. Not because you performed, but because you existed authentically. And in that mutual recognition, two sovereign paths finally intersect, proving that what is rare is not found by the crowd, but revealed to the one prepared to recognize it. As the truth settles deeper, and the question rises naturally within you of why, out of a world filled with polished faces and strategic suitors, you are the only one who truly aligns with the one the world desires. The answer unfolds not in flattery, but in frequency, because authenticity in a curated world is the rarest currency. and you carry it without effort, without calculation, without the need to distort yourself for approval, and that alone sets you apart, because while others have mastered presentation, you have mastered presence while others refine image. You refine integrity, and this distinction is not small, it is seismic, because to someone who has navigated years of surface-level interactions, your unfiltered truth feels like oxygen in a room starved of sincerity, and your authenticity was not born from convenience, but from hardship, from seasons where masks were stripped from you not by choice, but by circumstance, where betrayals forced you inward, where disappointments exposed illusions, where isolation demanded self-confrontation. And instead of fracturing you, these experiences refined you, shaping you into someone emotionally and spiritually whole. Not because you avoided pain, but because you integrated it. Not because you were spared disappointment, but because you metabolized it into wisdom. And wholeness is profoundly attractive to someone who is exhausted from managing fragments. Because when a powerful individual encounters someone who is not looking to be saved, not seeking elevation through association, not hoping to attach themselves to momentum, it disrupts the typical power dynamic entirely, because your desire is not rooted in need, but in alignment, and that creates energetic safety. Safety born from wanting nothing that compromises your own sovereignty, and to someone accustomed to being approached with hidden agendas, your lack of ulterior motive feels revolutionary, because you're not dazzled by their empire. You're curious about their essence, and that curiosity is clean, unpressured, unmanipulative, and in that cleanliness they find relief, because you do not see them as a stepping stone or a status symbol. You see them as a sovereign equal, and your independence reinforces this equality, because you're building your own mission, nurturing your own calling, advancing your own growth, and when two independent forces recognize one another, the dynamic shifts from pursuit to partnership, from imbalance to equilibrium. And your independence becomes magnetic precisely because it signals that you will not collapse into them. You will stand beside them, and beneath this dynamic lies something even deeper, the untraceable blueprint of your divine design, because you have never operated comfortably within standard templates. Never fit neatly into societal categories, never found satisfaction in prepackaged definitions of success. And for a long time that may have made you feel out of place, misunderstood, difficult to categorize, as if you were running advanced software in a world that preferred outdated operating systems. But what once felt like incompatibility was in truth intentional design, because a rare lock is not meant to open for common keys, and countless people in your past attempted to access your heart with charm, manipulation, projection, or pressure. And they failed not because you were guarded, but because they were mismatched. And in the same way, countless admirers have attempted to access your counterpart with status strategy or seduction, and they too failed, because compatibility at this level is not about surface similarity, but about soul architecture, about internal schematics drafted long before either of you understood your assignment, and when you finally meet it will not feel like persuasion, but inevitability. Not like convincing, but aligning, because at a structural level you fit your depth, balancing their ambition, your intensity complementing their vision, your resilience answering their discernment, and despite the abundance of options surrounding them, your presence will stand apart with unmistakable clarity, because destiny does not compete. It converges, and convergence carries a sense of rightness that cannot be manufactured. And so while others may offer beauty, intellect, or opportunity only, you offer resonance, and resonance cannot be negotiated or substituted. It either exists or it does not. And between you it will exist in a way that feels both startling and ancient, as if two parallel journeys have finally intersected at the exact coordinate written into your spiritual timeline, proving that destiny is not about outperforming others, but about aligning with what was always yours. And this alignment was protected long before you recognized it, which leads you naturally into understanding that what once felt like rejection was in fact sacred quarantine. A season not of abandonment but of preservation, because every romantic disappointment you endured was not random heartbreak, but filtration, a system designed to remove what could contaminate your path. And when you revisit those memories with clarity, you begin to see the pattern: the partners who belittled your dreams, the ones who subtly tried to shrink your ambition so they could feel secure, the ones who withheld affection to maintain control. They were not evidence that you were unlovable, they were evidence that you were being shielded, because had you remained tethered to them, your timeline would have narrowed your potential, diluted your vision, compromised. And so heaven intervened not with spectacle, but with friction, allowing incompatibility to surface so that attachment would dissolve before damage became permanent. And those departures, as painful as they were acts of spiritual sanitation, removing energetic viruses of jealousy, insecurity, manipulation, disbelief before they could infect your destiny. And each heartbreak functioned as training, each betrayal strengthening your emotional musculature, teaching you boundaries, teaching you discernment, teaching you to differentiate between attention and affection, between intensity and intimacy. And in moments when it would have been easier to shrink, to settle, to accept less for temporary comfort, you were tested in your sovereignty, tested in your standards, tested in your willingness to choose alignment over convenience. And every time you chose yourself over a counterfeit version of love, you passed an unseen exam affirming to the universe that you would not trade your birthright for momentary relief. And these repeated tests developed within you a spiritual immune system, one that now detects inauthenticity instantly, one that recognizes red flags without rationalizing them away, one that senses energetic mismatch before logic attempts to justify it. And that immunity is what qualifies you for equal partnership, because you cannot co-rule an empire. If you're still vulnerable to manipulation, you cannot stand beside power if you're still negotiating your worth. And so the isolation that once felt punishing was in fact preparatory, the silence formative, the solitude sacred, because within those quiet seasons you learn to validate yourself without applause, to trust your intuition without external confirmation, to find your own company not empty but empowering. And that inner sovereignty is what now allows you to approach this union not as someone seeking completion, but as someone offering collaboration. And graduation from solitude does not mean you will never experience loneliness again. It means you no longer fear it. It means you know you can survive it without compromising your integrity. And that confidence transforms your relational posture entirely, because now you approach connection from fullness rather than lack, from clarity rather than confusion. And this shift signals that the sacred quarantine is lifting, not because you are desperate, but because you're ready to merge. Strength with strength, vision with vision, light with light. And when you look back, you will see that nothing was wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not the nights you questioned your value. All of it was filtration, all of it was protection disguised as delay. And now that protection transforms into permission to engage with someone whose presence amplifies rather than diminishes you, whose admiration does not intimidate but inspires, whose ambition does not compete but complements. And you will understand that the sacred quarantine was the most loving strategy ever enacted on your behalf, because it ensured that when the one the world desires finally stands before you, they encounter not a fragmented version of yourself, but the fully integrated sovereign you were always meant to become, ready not merely to be chosen, but to choose in return. As the sacred quarantine lifts and you step fully into sovereign readiness, what begins next will not announce itself with thunder, but with a ripple, because the ripple of arrival is subtle yet undeniable, a shift in atmosphere that you feel before you can logically explain it, as if the air itself has recalibrated around you, because when a destined counterpart moves into proximity, their energy often enters your field before their physical presence does. And this is not fantasy, but frequency two aligned vibrations beginning to register one another across distance. And the first sign is rarely dramatic spectacle, but internal movement, a heightened awareness that something is converging, a quiet anticipation that feels grounded rather than frantic. And then the synchronicities begin precise, rather than chaotic numbers repeating at meaningful moments. 1111 appearing just as you reflect on love, 222 surfacing when you release doubt, 707 flashing when you choose faith. Not as superstition, but as rhythmic punctuation, small confirmations that alignment is active, conversations overheard that mirror your private thoughts, strangers articulating themes you are contemplating in solitude, recurring names surfacing in unrelated contexts, a particular word echoing across platforms and encounters, as if the universe is highlighting a phrase for your attention, and alongside these subtle confirmations come physical signs that feel almost ceremonial. A feather resting where it logically should not be, a hawk circling above your home during a moment of clarity, an unexpected butterfly landing on your shoulder, as if to mark transition, the natural world participating in your convergence. Because alignment at this level reverberates beyond your mind into environment, and even the digital realm responds algorithms suggesting content aligned with your inner evolution, an intuitive pull guiding you to click on something you would normally scroll past. A profile catching your attention without urgency but with calm curiosity, and the nudge feels clean. Not obsessive, not desperate, but steady, as if your spirit is guiding your awareness toward coordinates already activated. And yet the most powerful sign of all is internal peace, because the restless searching that once hummed beneath your romantic longing begins to quiet. Not because you've surrendered to loneliness, but because something within you recognizes that movement has begun, and your nervous system reflects this recognition before your conscious mind catches up. Shoulders relaxing without effort, breath deepening, naturally sleep becoming more restorative, your body shifting out of vigilance into receptivity. And this biological regulation is not infatuation, but safety. Your cells discerning that what approaches is not a threat, but a match. And in that safety, creativity surges, ideas flowing more freely, inspiration rising unexpectedly, as if dormant circuits are being activated by their distant presence, because aligned partnership often awakens potential that solitary strength could not fully ignite. And then the dreams begin vivid and emotionally textured, not always revealing a clear face, but unmistakably carrying an essence, a voice, a sensation of walking beside someone across landscapes that feel both unfamiliar and ancient, and you wake not confused, but comforted, carrying an emotional afterglow that lingers throughout the day. And you understand that these dreams are previews, energetic rehearsals preparing your psyche for physical meeting, teaching your system to recognize what your spirit already knows, because the ripple of arrival is not chaos but confirmation, not fantasy but frequency aligning in real time. And when that frequency condenses into embodied presence, what unfolds next is defined not by noise, but by silence. Because the silent knowing that marks your first encounter will surprise you in its simplicity, as the usual internal chatter that accompanies attraction fails to appear the questions of whether you're impressive enough, attractive enough, interesting enough, dissolving into irrelevance, replaced instead by a steady hum of recognition. And you find yourself speaking without rehearsing, listening without strategizing, existing without performing, because the conversation flows not from a desire to convince but from shared curiosity, and the safety you feel is immediate and tangible. Your nervous system down-regulating in real time, heartbeat, steady breath, even mind clear. And this regulation is proof of compatibility far deeper than chemistry, because trauma bond connections often feel electric yet destabilizing, intense yet anxious, creating attachment through unresolved wounds, whereas soul alignment feels grounding and expansive, simultaneously powerful yet calm. And in their presence you sense no threat to your authenticity, no subtle pressure to shrink your intensity or exaggerate your achievements, no need to adjust your personality to maintain interest. And when you reveal parts of yourself once misunderstood, they lean in rather than recoil, fascinated rather than intimidated, celebrating what others once criticized. and you realize you're speaking a language that requires no translation. References landing effortlessly, values aligning without negotiation, humor shared without calculation. And even in silence, there is no awkwardness, only comfort, because the primary communication is energetic, your spirits conversing beneath words, and you recognize that the usual dating games feel obsolete. The tactics of delayed responses and calculated ambiguity, losing relevance in the presence of clarity, because when resonance is undeniable, ambiguity feels unnecessary, and you both sense that you're not strangers beginning but allies reuniting. Ancient collaborators converging for a current mission, and the distinction between trauma bond intensity and soul alignment stability becomes unmistakable trauma. Bonds ignite through chaos and unpredictability, while soul alignment stabilizes through clarity and consistency, and this connection feels less like a whirlwind romance and more like coming home, less like a spark that flares and fades and more like a steady flame that warms without burning. And in that steady warmth you recognize that what you were holding out for was not perfection but resonance, not excitement alone but peace. And as that peace solidifies, the relationship begins to reveal its greater purpose, because the kingdom of two that forms from this union is not an escape from life, but an elevation within it, not a fairy tale ending, but a divine assignment, a strategic alliance orchestrated not merely for personal happiness, but for collective impact. And when two sovereign individuals merge, they do not diminish into codependency, but multiply into momentum, their strengths interlocking like gears turning with greater power together than apart. And where you are visionary, they are strategist. Where you are healer, they are builder. Where you are intuitive, they are structural. And this complementary design transforms your partnership into a force, not through dominance but through alignment. And you begin to notice that projects once stalled accelerate ideas, once abstract crystallize doors once closed open with surprising ease, because your combined frequency generates a field that attracts opportunity and repels interference. And this multiplication of power is not ego-driven, but mission-oriented, about executing purpose with greater precision and reach. And publicly, this union becomes its own testimony, not as a display of superiority, but as quiet recalibration of narrative. Those who once doubted you now forced to reconcile their assumptions with reality, witnessing you beside someone they admire and recognizing their misjudgment. Yet this vindication is not your primary reward. It is merely a byproduct of alignment, because the true elevation lies in the rooms you now enter together. Networks expanding conversations, deepening influence, broadening, and you're not there as an accessory but as a recognized force in your own right. Your partner amplifying rather than eclipsing your voice, celebrating your growth as passionately as their own, and your visible partnership becomes a beacon for others who have almost given up on sacred union, proof that waiting on divine timing and doing inner work yields tangible reward. And beyond romance, your legacy begins to take shape not only in ventures built or art created, but in the invisible ripples you send through culture, inspiring standards to rise, encouraging authenticity over convenience, demonstrating that ambition and spirituality can coexist without contradiction. And generational impact emerges from this alignment, because those who observe your partnership witness a model of sovereignty and mutual respect. And in this kingdom of two, you understand that love is not the conclusion of your story, but the activation of your next level, not the reward for endurance, but the catalyst for expansion. And the ripple that began as subtle synchronicity now expands into sustained influence, proving that destiny, when honored, does not merely satisfy the heart, but reshapes the world around it.